Hello everyone and welcome back to another video on the channel. Today we're going to be talking about the series finale of Better Call Saul, a show that I have absolutely been loving the past month or so that I've been watching it. I didn't watch Breaking Bad until I think it was last year or maybe 2 years ago. I watched it for the first time all the way through and I really liked it. That was a fantastic show from beginning to end, had a near perfect ending, and had some of my favorite characters. And one of my favorite characters from that show was, of course, Saul Goodman, played by Bob Odenkirk, so perfectly. And whenever you do a spin-off to any show or any movie or whatever you're doing with some side character that is, at a lot of times a comedic relief, like Bob Odenkirk was in that show, you always wonder if that character can actually sustain their own show, sustain their own story arc, especially for 6 seasons, as many episodes as the show has had. And of course, Vince Gilligan and Peter Gould were able to just craft just a masterpiece out of Better Call Saul. And I would barely say maybe, possibly this show is on par, if not better in some ways, than Breaking Bad. And I think a lot of that goes to the writing. From all the writers of the show, all the directors and all the creators of this show, the writing, of making Breaking Bad all those years ago, and then, perfecting their craft from season 1 all the way to season 5 of that show. And then when you start, a new show a couple years later and you go another, several 6 years worth of TV, you're getting better and better as a writer. And as a result of that, this show is damn near poetic. I love the writing and the style of this show and the cinematography and the performances. Everything about this thing is almost perfect. And so I'll do my overall thoughts on the series as a whole, but I will try to focus on the finale with a lot of spoilers. So if you have not seen Better Call Saul or Breaking Bad for that matter, definitely go watch these two shows. I think it's definitely worth your time. And I just love the show, so I'm excited to talk about the final season in general. But overall, my thoughts on Better Call Saul, especially after watching the first season, was that it was extremely different from Breaking Bad. Especially if you have not seen Better Call Saul yet and you watch Breaking Bad and you were hesitant to watch the show, just know going in that you're watching a very different show. Breaking Bad had all the flashy, story elements that will draw the viewers in, like, you're dealing with, a science teacher making meth in a lab and selling it and becoming a distributor and doing all these crazy things and trying to escape the law the entire time, being chased by his brother who's a cop and by the cartel who he's trying to get in good graces with, but also trying to screw over at the same time. And of course, he had the great performances from Bryan, Cranston, and Aaron Paul that really did bring that show to such great heights. And, like I said, it was the flashier of the shows. But then when you get to Better Call Saul, you are getting into a lawyer show. You're watching this character named James McGill, who would later become Saul Goodman, and you're seeing him try to become a legitimate lawyer, or as he does, and as he always does in both Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad, he cuts corners, he tries to find the easy way out. He can always talk himself out of any situation that he finds himself in, all the way up until the end, all the way up until this finale. He's trying to talk his way out of every situation. He just will never learn that he is just incapable of following the rules. And so it's a very different show on paper, and the writing of it is very different, and the character arcs in this show follow the same sort of mirrored, you're watching this character go down a spiraling path of badness, essentially. And so it does have those similar beats and character, but it is a completely different show. It makes its own way throughout the first few seasons, and then it slowly becomes the flashy Breaking Bad type thing when its B storyline for the first few seasons being the cartel stuff with Mike Ehrmantraut and all those characters. Gus Fring is in this show, and the twins are in this show, and a lot of great characters. The Salamanca family has a big role in this show too, and eventually that kind of takes over towards the second half of the show, and it kind of melds into a great way to lead directly into Breaking Bad in a beautifully poetic way. Like I said, it was just so perfect in how it led to that. One of my favorite moments in this season was when everything went down with, Kim, with Saul, with the cartel, with the Salamanca family, with all those characters, all that went downhill. And of course you have Kim Wexler goes off on her own. She leaves Jimmy because she finds that she is essentially like, everybody has a weakness. Jimmy's weakness is that he just can't stop cutting the corners and can't stop, bending the rules to his own will. And Kim's weakness was essentially Saul. It was Jimmy McGill. He was her weakness, and she decides to put him off on the side. She leaves, and now Saul is on his own. He goes, creates everything that we know him from in Breaking Bad. And of course, you have Mike Ehrmantraut come in. He gets introduced to Walter White, and he realizes that maybe you shouldn't go with this guy. Maybe this guy is not the direction that you should go. It is a bad idea. He's an amateur, and he's going to cause a lot of problems. And James McGill, now Saul Goodman, decides to go with it anyway because he will do anything. And that is kind of what leads him down that downward spiral that he goes through in Breaking Bad. And like I said, it is so poetic for him and Mike to have that conversation, to say maybe it's the wrong path to go down towards. And they had the episode of Bagman and Bad Choice Road where you really get to see how Saul just cannot get over it. And he had so many chances to get out, but he never did. And so to see him go down yet another bad choice road, and all the decisions that he made throughout the entirety of the series, even smaller moments towards the beginning of the show, the first few seasons that you think are inconsequential, that become such integral moments of his character that led him to where he ends up in Breaking Bad, it is just so perfectly weaved together. And I've never seen a spin-off, especially of a show with this many episodes, just perfectly flow into the next thing. I love seeing the Salamanca stuff with Gus Fring. I love seeing Hector Salamanca out of the wheelchair at first. He's running his cartel business and he's introduced to Gus Fring, and they have all this, conflict with each other. And you have one of my favorite characters that was introduced in this show being Nacho Varga. I loved his character. I love that actor. He was one of the bright spots of this entire series, and to see him try to take out Hector Salamanca, Gus Fring saves his life so he can really stick it to him because he hates him that much. He wants to, he doesn't want to kill him, he wants to make his life insufferable. And to see that all lead to where it is in Breaking Bad, and see how it led to all that, and how poetic it is, again, mirroring the stuff that happens later on in Breaking Bad where Hector Salamanca gets the best of Gus Fring. In this show, Gus Fring gets the better of Hector Salamanca. And so again, it is so perfectly balanced and it so perfectly leads into the other one. Tony Dalton as Lalo Salamanca was also a very great threat in this show, especially as it pertained to Saul Goodman's character, because, Saul was a lawyer. For the first 3 seasons of the show, it's mainly focused on Jimmy McGill and Chuck McGill, the two brothers, and how they're kind of battling it out in their own different brotherly way, where you can tell that there's some love for each other, but there's so much resentment, and there's so much hate, and there's so much just jealousy that's baked into this relationship that it goes down such a terrible path, especially for Chuck, and the way that he just knows that Jimmy's going to slip and he's going to go down that dark path, and he eventually does, and he gets tied in with Lalo Salamanca, and Lalo Salamanca is a character to kind of bleed these two worlds together that pushes down, Saul down that bad choice road. And so all these things work perfectly, and I do think that this show, now getting to the finale, ended perfectly for a lot of these characters. I mentioned her earlier, that is Kim Wexler, who, by the way, one of the greatest character names of all time, and Ray Seehorn plays her brilliantly. When she was first introduced in the show, I was like, okay, I like this character. I'm curious to see what they're going to do with it. But that relationship that they formed throughout this entire show between her and Jimmy McGill, and then her and Saul Goodman, and how that dynamic was different, and how she kind of fell down that same path that Jimmy went to. He was essentially her poison. He was the bad luck that she just couldn't get away from. And then you get to see all these black and white sequences come to a head at the end of this season, and you get to see all the stuff that happens after the fact of Breaking Bad. And you get to see how Jimmy McGill was still, or now Saul Goodman was still, pulling these scams, still doing all these things, the street level scams that he was doing with his friends in the earlier seasons, going back to who he always was, and eventually he gets arrested for it. And he was able to talk himself out from like a life sentence plus 190 years all the way down to 7 years, in the way that only Saul Goodman could do. And I was eating that stuff up. I was like, that's Saul Goodman. He still has it. After all these years of running, after all these years of scams, he was able to do all the things in this final season that he had done throughout the show, just in his own different ways while on the run. He was doing the street level scams. When he was arrested, he was being that lawyer. He was getting his clients himself out of a shitty situation, trying to talk his way down to the lowest sentence possible. But it was all a game to just see if he could still do it, and to also, when he's in courts, he can blow it all up and just do it in front of Kim Wexler to kind of rebuild that relationship, because he finally realized that that is what mattered most. And I think that is one of the most tragic things in this show, was their relationship was so beautiful. It was so good, but, with Ray Seehorn's character, she could not stop feeding into Jimmy's own, slipping Jimmy style, the thing that he would do all the time, the way he always tried to cut corners, and she ate that up, and they were just bad for each other. And the reason why it never worked is because she could change. She was able to stop, move away, and give that stuff up, but Jimmy never could, and she didn't think that he ever could. And so when he stands up in that courtroom and he has that beautiful speech saying that, Walter White couldn't have done it without him, he pulls down that facade of him being so terrified of Walter White that is the reason why he did all the things that he did, the thing that he was able to get his sentence all the way down to. But then he finally said the truth, that Walter White couldn't have done it without him, which is very true, and that it was all him. He did it for all these different reasons, but now at the end, his admission of this guilt is his true character arc. It's him finally moving past it and is able to, you know, have that moment with Kim at the end of the show that, again, poetically mirrors all these scenes that they had at the precinct earlier in the season, them standing up against that wall and that iconic shot of the lights, you know, spilling in from the top corner of the screen. One of the most beautiful shots of cinematography in the show, period. And then there's them in the prison, standing up against that wall, taking one last smoke together, and it's just beautifully shot. I cannot stress enough of how much I love the look of this show. If you thought Breaking Bad, especially towards the later seasons, the cinematography was at the top of their game, Better Call Saul starts at that level, and just by the time it gets to season 5 and 6, is just perfect, and especially in this finale when you get to see these black and white sequences in the beautiful color grading that they did to make it super contrasting the way that it looked, and them standing up against that wall and how it mirrored the earlier seasons, and just all the different Easter eggs and all the different characters that they brought back in the finale, and just how satisfying of an ending it was for everybody involved, for characters old and new. You get to see Chuck again, you get to see Marie again, you get to see Mike in this episode, you get some closure with Howard's character in this episode, which was really great to see. You just get so much closure. And when it comes to finales, the Breaking Bad finale and now this finale are some of the greatest finales ever put to TV. I was super impressed with this show. I absolutely loved it. The character development, everything about it was just wonderful. So that will be my review for Better Call Saul, the final season, really the series as a whole. I really enjoyed talking about this with you guys, and I'm sure there's so much that I didn't get to talk about. You know, I wish I could have talked about more of Gus and the Salamancas, and especially Nacho Varga and Kim Wexler and all these different characters, especially the relationship between Chuck and Jimmy. All that stuff was great in the earlier seasons. I really liked Howard. I really liked all these different characters, all the different type of lawyer stuff that was going on, all the scams that they did. It was just one nearly perfect show. I absolutely loved it. So comment down below if you guys watch Better Call Saul and what you thought of this series. Tell me everything down below. I'm really curious to hear all you guys' thoughts. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure you guys subscribe to the channel and like this video if you did enjoy. And also check out other videos I have here on the channel. So thanks everybody for watching. I hope to see you all in my next one.